Thank you, Dr. Coonan. We're now going to have our panel discussion, so we're going to ask the 3 members of the brain injury voices to come up to the front table. For this portion of our program will be a panel discussion from 3 members of Brain Injury Voices, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
I'm Hilary, Zayed, Paula Sparks,
and Rorie Lee.
So the topic is, of course, happiness. And I guess what I wanted to ask each member of the group is, what does happiness mean to them personally? I'm getting there.
I'll begin. For myself, happiness was critical in the moving forward process. I'd spent quite a few years at home before I was well enough to come to outpatient rehab, and so I was very isolated. Friends were gone. What I did for work and for play were all gone. So I kind of felt that happiness was something that I needed to do for myself, because there really wasn't anybody around who was going to do that for me. So for me, happiness was a critical part of moving forward. And then eventually my husband Salah said to me, you know what, you have one job in life right now, and that's to be happy. And I thought about that for a long time, because when I'm happy, he's happy, he can go to work, he can provide for me. You know, there was just a whole lot of things connected to me being happy. So that was my job, and that's what I work on.
For me, it took a little while for me to realize that there were challenges that I didn't notice. And I've always been pretty much a happy person to begin with. So it wasn't so difficult, I don't think, for me. But the things that make me happy are things like having time to get lost in a good book or a magazine, taking time to enjoy a home or surroundings, being with family and friends, lots of laughter, time to be creative, time to help others by volunteering, and being able to be flexible and have no routine. And what my injury has actually afforded me more of those opportunities, because it meant I didn't go back to work, so I could focus on those kinds of things.
I agree with what you said. As Dr. Coonan said, happiness has a lot of different meanings, and I think the reason that it has so many meanings is that it varies from person to person and from time to time. We have a lot of synonyms for happiness, from joy to pleasure to well-being, satisfaction, contentment, joy. So I think it takes the different forms for me at times too. I can say that, in all honesty, I'm a happier person now than I was before my brain injury. I'm not employed. Oops, I'm clumsier.
Stay away from the electricity.
To stay away from this thing, apparently. It doesn't mean that there aren't challenges, and it doesn't mean that life is just a bed of rose petals either. But I'm very grateful that I survived my brain injury and that I'm relatively physically intact. I have people I care about in my life, and that's important to me. Sometimes it's just a simple matter of just being content with the life that you have. Other times, success in completing a task, making a quilt, or doing some gardening, paying the bills on time. Things that I used to take for granted really give me a feeling of success and accomplishment. And I get a great deal of pleasure and joy out of spending time with my family and friends. I have more time to do that now. And it isn't always easy, but I do try to focus on the positive rather than the negative. It really helps to be involved with Brain Injury Voices, because it gives me the opportunity to pay it forward, to pay something forward to the greater community. And I can use some of the skills that I gained in my lifetime as an educator to make a contribution to society. And I think that all of us want to have some sort of meaning in our life, and that tends to make us happy.
Is this okay now? Can everybody hear me? So the next question I have to ask the panel is, how have you gone about achieving or not achieving happiness? What adaptations have you had to make?
Well, on my refrigerator at home, I have a magnet, and it's a quote from Sousa, and it says, "Happiness is a journey, not a destination." So, to set out to achieve happiness, perhaps, is a little bit of a leap. But it was important for me to do those same things that have always been important to me, to be happy. And in order to do those, I had to pick up some strategies along the way that made me be able to continue to do the kinds of things I like. Entertaining. I learned to let go of some of it and let other people take responsibility. Reading or just relaxing, well, timeouts are frequently needed, so it's a great chance to sit down and read a magazine and watch TV, and I don't have to feel guilty about doing it. Volunteering and helping others is really a really important piece for me, and because of the no work, I have lots of time to do that now, but once again, I have to be realistic about what I can say yes to. So using those strategies are very important in helping me find my happiness.
A brain injury can result in a lot of losses, and they can be really overwhelming at times. Especially important in my case were the feelings that I had lost control over my whole life. Along with the ability to work and to be the main support in the family, there were a lot of things I just couldn't do well anymore, and I was used to doing things well. But some of the things I've done that have helped have been learning to meditate. Staying focused is really hard for me sometimes, along with a lot of other people with brain injuries. And trying to stay in the present really helps me to be aware more of the positive things and to try to look at things from a more positive perspective. One of my mantras is choose to be amused. It's not always easy, but sometimes, maybe not in the moment, but eventually, I'm usually able to find the humor in the things that happen to me that didn't used to happen to me. For example, for decades I spent most of my time outside the house working long hours, and now I don't have to do that anymore, so I really get to spend time in my home. It's the first time in my life I've ever actually spent a lot of time in my home, and I enjoy that. I have a less structured life, so I have to kind of impose a structure on that, and I'm still working on that. But I try to look at the simple everyday things that I took for granted, like the fact that nature is still really beautiful, and I have time now to appreciate it. I've had to learn how to do some things differently, but I can still do a lot of things, and I can spend more time with my family and friends. And napping is an underrated tool. Really, it's one of my favorite tools. There's nothing like rest to help the brain reset itself, and sometimes you'll think you're not having a good day, you take a nap, and then things really turn out to be pretty good.
I found out through my personal process that happiness is not something that I could find. It would have to be something I'd have to create. And I went on quite a journey about a year ago looking for happiness. You know, when my husband challenged me that that's my one job, that's a hard job when you're not really feeling up to it. So I had to create happiness, and I discovered that it's my responsibility to be happy. Nobody else can do that for me. And so I started this kind of journey quest to find out, what do I enjoy doing? And to create more of that in my life. What was I really struggling with, and did I need to keep those things in my life, or could I change them out and do something different? So I found that during the recovery process, I had kind of imploded because there was this survival mode that took place, and my world became all about me. And I had to get out of that because that wasn't a way to be happy. And in coming out of that, what I discovered was that I really enjoy being with other people. And I really enjoy doing things with other people. So one of my favorite activities I discovered was actually just going and painting with other people who paint. Going to workshops and learning with other people how to do mosaics. I discovered volunteering, doing for others. I had read something somewhere where it said, if you're feeling depressed, read a tragedy of somebody else's life and you will start to feel better. And so I did a little bit of exploring about who's in worse shape than I am? And I discovered a lot of people are in places I don't want to be anywhere in those shoes. But I had something to offer those people that I was running into and meeting. And it was unexpected to me because, you know, I didn't do art before this, but I discovered all sorts of people who really enjoyed doing art, and I could help them with that. And so that was part of how I went about achieving this. I'm not always happy. I went through 6 months this past year where I thought getting off of the couch was the biggest challenge in the world. And yet during that time, it was my job to be happy. And so the pressure of not being happy, trying to be happy, and I went about my daily routines of, you know, volunteering, and I'd have a smile on my face for that and feel happy, and I'd go and do my grandson for a day with my husband, and I'd feel happy, and it was still a challenge. And then I realized that there's so much about attitude wound up in what happipiness is, and to pull it forward and to find the things that help me maintain that, such as my counselor, or if I need medication, I add on the grateful journal, I add on the journal in the morning where I just like spill my brains out onto paper and write for a few pages. Whatever it takes, I kind of have to work at it when I get in those places. But the wonderful thing about when you're in those places, for me, when I come out of those places, I am so much happier than I was before I went into it. So the process, I think, works in finding that emotional and spiritual, all those little crutches to stand on during the hard times, and then maintain them and keep them going during the good times.
What suggestions would you give to others who've had a stroke or a brain injury when they ask that question, how am I going to be happy after this?
Well, of course, it's very individual, but I try to remind myself that happiness is really a feeling and a state of being. It's not a state of doing. You don't have to go do what you did before to be happy. A lot of us may find out that we weren't as happy as we thought we were. When we get away from our jobs or whatever it is we did before, we may discover that, you know, I really wasn't enjoying myself, or I was really driven and I didn't have time for the things I really cared about. And now, instead of saying, well, if only someday, today is someday, and we get to do some of those things. So each person's brain injury is unique, so everybody's recipe for happiness will be unique. But some of the things that I do is I try to exert control over the things I can control. And as you said, attitude is important. In aviation, there's a saying, attitude determines altitude. So I try to remind myself that I'm responsible for my attitude. Try to reframe what you can't control. You can choose to be amused. You can look at something as an opportunity rather than a disaster. There's also another saying that I share with my friend Karen here. Wait another day. Wait until tomorrow. Sometimes things look much better the next day than they do right now. Focus on what you can do and not what you can't. And that is really a process. It takes time, because when you're grieving your losses, you're grieving what you can't do anymore and who you used to be. But we all are valuable people, and we can all contribute something. Learn to do something new. This is a great opportunity to do something that maybe you've always said, when I have time, when I retire, someday. So try to learn how to do it now. It doesn't have to be difficult or complicated, but can be really rewarding. Do something for someone else. Nothing makes you feel better than being able to help somebody else. It makes you feel useful and like you're contributing. And I'm big, and so is my husband, on collecting sayings of people more with it than we are. And one of them that's my favorite is, nothing is worth more than this day. I have this card from Goethe. And I try to treat each day as the gift that it is.
Well, you stole some of my ideas. We think alike. But first and foremost, I had give yourself time, because it's going to take time for you to really realize where you are and what's going on in your life. So give yourself time to discover, to get used to and accept the new you before you start thinking about other things you might want to do. Think about what you can do, not about what you can't do. Think about doing things differently. I think you mentioned that, Rorie. Do them in a different way than you did them before. Think about doing different things. And once again, the finding ways to do things for other people, there's nothing, I don't think, that returns to you the pleasure and the happiness than doing things for others. Little things, big things, whatever they may be. Most importantly is you have to laugh at yourself. You know, and if you're having a really bad day, there's nothing to laugh about, go to the card store, go to the aisle that has the funny cards, and you laugh out loud. They may think you're crazy, but...
or you're on a cell phone.
Yeah, maybe. But laughter really is the best medicine, and there's a lot of stuff out there that tells us it helps our blood flow and our awareness, helps us to be more creative, helps with memory, and all kinds of other issues that we may have, health issues. Best of all, it's easy exercise. It provides a little aerobic exercise, and it helps exercise our facial and abdominal muscles, which otherwise we don't want to bother with.
I have spent time exploring what makes you happy and then pursuing that on a daily basis. Again, help find someone who's in need or who is in want. Listen to others. Sit and listen actively. Read or strike up a conversation with someone who has suffered a tragedy in their life. Research happiness on the internet. Read books about happiness. Discuss with a counselor or friend. Listen and attempt the answers that are given. I started this happiness project. You'll find this handout inside your what do you call that? Folder. There was a book that I ran across in my research, and it's called The Happiness Project. And this woman, she had everything. She had a wonderful family, wonderful job. She couldn't understand why she wasn't happy with all that she had. And so she started this project called The Happiness Project to help herself feel better. And in the process, she took a whole year and took pieces of her life, her marriage, her kids, what she does for work, and explored how to make it a happier time and place. And so I went on my own happiness project interviewing of all my friends and people that I know, family members, and attempted to come up with 100 happiness strategies, or almost 100 strategies. And I wanted to make it interactive, not only for you, but also for myself, because when the times are hard, it's hard to remember what strategy can I use to be a little happier right now, or to work towards happiness. So checking them off as you try them, and then you'll see on the last page, there's 15 blank spaces for what works for you, or if you come up with new ones, what works. There's also a website there called the Happiness Project Toolbox, and if you get on the internet, there's all this interactive blogs and people and things to do that are around the happiness, doing a long-term happiness, self-help kind of situation through the internet. So I hope that you can find some strategies and resources within here. I love the quote at the top, happiness doesn't always make you feel happy. Activities that contribute to long-term happiness don't always make you feel good in the short term. In fact, they're sometimes downright unpleasant, such as that exercise.
Yeah. I did forget to mention one member of Voices, and that's Ziva. She's on the floor here. Rorie, maybe quickly, how does Ziva play into your happiness and strategies for being who you are today?
Well, you may not have seen Ziva. Ziva's a standard poodle, and she's been with me for about 18 months. She's 2.5 years old. She's a rescue, so I did something for someone else, and I felt good about it. But it was really for me. And she allows me to go out and to drive and to do things on my own that I was having difficulty with before. And she is such a fun-loving, sweet, just loving dog. Just watching her running around, leaping like a little lamb, it's a joy, even just taking care of her. I'm not sure Ross thinks it's such a joy to have to groom her, but but she really has added to my life, and she's part of my family, as well as a tool that I use to get around, to do things that. And when I get lost, we talk about where we are, and we get on the phone, and we find ourselves on the little Google map thing, and instead of just pulling over to the side of the road and crying, which is what I used to do.
So certainly service dogs are becoming more and more of a tool for individuals with brain injuries, and we really feel very fortunate that Ziva is part of Voices. Even though she doesn't bark that much, and she doesn't really have a voice. She barks. Yeah. We have a few minutes. I didn't know if anybody had a question that you'd like to offer the panel here, or even a thought. Go ahead, Karen.
I think that it's important to be me, and I laugh to myself all the time. And my neighbor challenged me, said, why do you laugh? And I said, well, that's part of acceptance.
So if you didn't hear it, Karen, who comes to our support group quite a bit, says that she laughs all the time, and that's part of her acceptance. And even though neighbors might say, why are you doing that? That's her way of accepting having had a stroke.
I think it was Hilary who said it, but it might have been Paula, but it was something about laughter also. And I'm just wondering, what was the instruction they gave themselves about that?
So Neil's asking about what were the instructions about laughing for the people in the back.
Was it, you know, what I thought was interesting was that, was it Hilary? Was it you?
It was Paula.
It was Paula, yeah, I knew it was one of you. But I remember what she said was that there was something about laughing out loud. You know, if you look at cards, you laugh out loud.
Laughing out.
And I was thinking about, you know, when I actually not just smile, but actually laugh out loud. And it sounded like you had a kind of a mission to like outwardly laugh, and that you talked about some of the benefits of laughing, as it not just smiling, but like laughing.
Right. Well, I've always been a laugher anyways. As a matter of fact, I'm sure when I was in the hospital and in rehab and had a lot of company and there was a lot of noise coming from the room, they probably wondered what on earth was going on considering the condition I was in. So it's not really hard for me to laugh too often, but it really is important that you laugh at yourself when you make, as Karen said, you laugh with others, and as you said, going to the car department, but laughter really is physically good for you. It does things to your body.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is, what's the difference between laughing and laughing out loud?
Well, you know,
like to me, I laugh at myself a lot of times, but I don't do it out loud.
actually there's a whole
Maybe I
new
don't really laugh at myself.
there's a whole new movement about laughter. You can see some of that online where they actually are having laughing workshops where people just go, it's not that they tell jokes or anything, they just stand there and laugh. And it's
contagious.
It has lots of benefits for you.
That's how I find her in a crowd of people. Wait and listen for the laugh, and then I can find her.
Jordan, you have your hand up. Yeah.
Like, breakdance, conferences, workshopping, food. And I was thinking, like, why not start like a team
Yeah.
like the younger generation?
And that's definitely is a need, Jordan. So, you know, because teens want to be with teens, and when you've had something happen to you, you want to be with teens. I know you belong to Maine Adaptive. There's a lot of teens there. You've got to go back. You've got to go where they are, because they're, you know, unfortunately we don't see as many teens here. But
Well, I was thinking about starting
That would be great.
Yeah.
It's a great idea.
And maybe Voices, and we can help you with that. We did have one in the past, and we partnered with Bayside to share those teams, but let's see what we can do, and we'll talk to the other therapists in the outpatient department where we do see some teams. And if we do, will you co-facilitate it? Okay, got your name and number. Okay, thanks, Jordan. Any other questions?
I had one other thought, Kathy, as I'm sitting here, is it's important for us all to remember that it's not someone else's responsibility for us to be happy. We need to make ourselves find the happiness ourselves. And often I know at my home that spouses often is the one that takes the brunt of all of this. It's when things are not going on too well. So it's important for us to be happy, not to expect someone else to do everything that's going to make us feel good.
Can I have one other thing?
Sure.
One of the things that really changed me around was a thing called the butterfly effect. I read this small book called The Butterfly Effect, which was a scientific principle that when a butterfly flaps its wings, the molecules move, and eventually the molecules move something on the other side of the planet. And I know I'm oversimplifying it, but the premise is that if a butterfly flaps its wings and creates a hurricane on the other side of the earth, think about everything that you do, that I do. It matters. And that kind of changed how I started viewing things. Everything I do matters. Then I better start being happy, I better start smiling, I better start appreciating what I have, because it matters, and it's not only going to affect me, everyone I come in contact with, it will matter in some way. And that changed a lot of how my attitude towards things.
Yes, Carol?
For folks who are new at brain injury, how long did it take before you kind of went through the grieving process to get to a place where you consider yourself happy again?
For me, I spent probably 3 years being happy because I didn't know any different. You know, I just had a constant smile, it seemed like. That's how I remember it. I could be wrong, we'd have to ask the law. But then I went through 2 years of down, and then I'd say on the 5th year, I started turning things around. So I'm in my 6th year now.
You know, it was a couple of years before I realized that things that I thought were going to be different weren't going to be different, or that there were things that I didn't realize were not quite right. And I wouldn't say that I was unhappy at that point in time, but at that point, when I realized things weren't quite what I thought they were, then I struggled to figure out and get the answers that I needed. And frankly, finding a support group made a big difference in the world, because you're with people who understand the kinds of things you're going through. And that support group is like a big family. I mean, you walk into that room and everyone knows one another, and we smile and say hello, or you might run into someone out at the store or something. And then the next step for going further was when I became a part of Voices, when we formed Voices, and now it's bigger than us. It's not just about us. So it's a couple of years sometimes before you realize what you need. You're focused on the getting better, the physical pieces and that sort of thing, and then maybe a couple of years before you realize that there's something that you need to work on.
I worked full-time for a year and part-time for a year after my brain injury before I had to accept that I just couldn't work anymore. So I have been a little over 4 years out now, and I'd say it took me at least 2 years just to kind of come to terms with the fact that I was going to have permanent impairments. But I would say that probably the last 2 years when I've been working with Voices, which started by going to the support group, as Paula said, that's been, I still grieve some losses, I'm still working on that, but I'm generally much happier than I was before. So it took a couple of years.
Well, I think we're going to end now, but I'd like to thank all 4 of you for being here and sharing your thoughts.